Hello everybody and welcome back to SkySaga Make It Real. So this week I was actually I got a bit nostalgic and was flicking through some old photos and I found these guys. So these are some photos that I took a little while ago, I think all the way back like Alpha 4, Alpha 5, somewhere around then. And these were photos where I was trying to get up really close to a raw bone so that I could create a really cool thumbnail on the video. But the interesting thing for me is the actual dagger that you can see right here. This is probably actually one of the best shots of it. So this is the dagger, or one of the old daggers from that alpha, and it was actually probably one of the best weapons in the game at the time because it had a very high damage per second because it was really fast and kind of on par with the sword for how much damage it actually did. And it also had this really cool two-tone effect going on. So as you can see, even in the little thumbnail and in the actual image here, the blade itself is in a different metal to the actual back section of the blade, the handguard, and the pommel. Also, as you can just sort of see at the top there, the pommel has an embedded gem in it. So it looks really cool. And I actually quite like these daggers. I got quite attached to them over the course of using them, and yeah, there's a couple of other images in here, and I will continue to go through these at some point. There you go, that's a better kind of image of that little gem up the top there. But as you can see, this is actually quite a cool little dagger, and I thought this thing would go really nicely with the jungle sword that we've already created. So rather than going through some of the other stuff that I have right now, I want to go ahead and try my hardest to get this dagger done. So obviously these images that I've got myself aren't actually going to really help too much with crafting up this dagger. So to try and get a better idea of the actual shape of it and to get a better image, I went across to the forums and I found this guy. So this is in an old thread. This is from CF Waffles. It was a conversation about whether or not the actual recipe for this thing showed up in the Chronicle, and let's just go back into this. And as you can see, this has got the actual shape of this knife, this dagger, done and dusted. This is actually from a later alpha. I think this is from like Alpha 6 maybe. It might be a little bit before that. But it does give me all of the shapes and things that I need to get this dagger to actually work. So we're going to take this across into the drawing software that I normally use. We're going to take this shape and then we're going to take that through into the modeling software and export that, or extrude that out, I guess, into a 3D model. So the things I think are going to be a little bit challenging are potentially this handguard. So this handguard, I need to make a full kind of square shape and somehow still manage to have this slant in the other two sides. And then also, yeah, probably the handle I think is going to be the other one. The handguard itself probably should be okay, and then of course sizing this thing is going to be quite interesting. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to look at the sword that I currently have and size this kind of sort of the same as the sword. I might make the hand grip just a little bit shorter than the sword and then use the sizing of this guy to get a good indication of how big this thing is. And then we're going to try and use some of these other images that I've got over here to give me a sense of width of the blade and of the handle and all of that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I might just take a bit of a guess at it and see how we go. I think these colors are pretty cool. I'm not sure exactly how well I'm going to be able to get those to come in, but we'll see what colors I can actually pull off my printer as I go through and do this. So there we go. Let's go ahead and pull this photo that I've got into the drawing software and see with the shape that we can get out of it. And here we go. I've now got this knife all modeled up. As you can see, we pulled the knife down and away. I've got this nice little model or little drawing of the knife slash dagger here underneath. So that's pretty cool. I've kind of done this a little bit interestingly. So as you can see, I've overlapped some of these sections, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the modeling software I use handles these overlapping sections. It could be a bit of an interesting one to extrude. I didn't really show too much of this drawing stuff because it is pretty straightforward. I literally just draw points down and curve them out to where I feel they need to be. this curve of this top of the blade may be a little bit steep right now, but I like that a lot. It looks pretty cool. I also really like the little serrations on the bottom of this knife. I think it looks just awesome. So we're going to continue on through. As you can see, I've kind of overlapped these pieces a little bit, as I said, and that's mostly so that they're actually going to slot together. I'll end up cutting sections out of each of the pieces so that the thing slots together exactly in the same way that I did the forest sword. Now, obviously, the only other thing here is that the hilt I haven't actually done too much modeling on, because I am literally going to be doing some stuff to this in the actual software that will get all of these shapes and stuff into it without really having to do too much of anything, which should be quite cool. So the other thing too is that this hilt is actually going to be how and where I take all of my modeling inspiration from for the rest of this project. Because as we've seen before, this hilt is basically square, so I'm going to extrude this whole thing out to be so that this bit is square, or at least square the right way around, and then that is going to determine how thick the handle is and how thick the handguard is, and therefore how thick the blade is. So let's get this across into modeling software. So the knife, dagger, sorry, I keep saying knife. The dagger is coming along really well. Check this out. I've brought it into the modeling software and kind of extruded some pieces out and had a bit of a look at it. I'm thinking this handle might be a little bit too long, but that's okay. That's something we can change later. What I'm trying to work out now is how to get this kind of blade edge into the dagger. It turns out that the modeling software I'm using really does not like this curve, so I'm having to split it into sections and cut the curve that way. And as you can see, it's causing these kind of little fractures in this in the actual blade. So this is the reason why it doesn't like this curve, or it doesn't like putting this kind of blade edge on this curve, is because there's this mismatch between these two pieces and those two curves that the software could not sort out. So I created that split myself, and then the software was like, oh, okay, cool, whatever, we can just put a little ridge there. So obviously I'm going to have to go through, that ridge itself is quite tiny, but I am going to have to go through at the very end of all of this and sand this blade down a little bit to get rid of some of those ridges. But it's going pretty well. I think I need to cut this next piece a couple more times just to get it to work and behave nicely, essentially. But we do have this next little piece that I can do right now. Hopefully this works on camera. If it doesn't, I have to go through, yeah. It needs a little extra cut. You can see, yeah, the curve hasn't actually cut quite where it needs to cut. So I actually need to undo this curve here and cut it an extra like mil or so away from where I cut it before, and then that should hopefully fix that issue. This is just going to be a little bit fiddly getting this blade to cut, but once it is cut, it's going to look really cool. So I'm not too unhappy with that. The other thing I do want to do is come through here at some point and kind of chamfer this off a little bit so that it's not as thick and fat in the handguard, and it comes down to kind of a point, but not really. That's something we'll have a look at in a little while as well. But first and foremost, I need to get this handle cut. So we are getting really close now. I had to make a small change to the dagger. So this was the old kind of line segment that we had before, and this is the new one. So it's a lot more kind of angled, and that's kind of a discrepancy actually between the two reference images I was using. The Chronicle image that I used to draw this out showed this kind of nice and curvy, although it was a little pixelated, so it may not have actually been, whereas the actual in-game using the dagger, this stuff was all nice and angled and had these really nice chamfers on the edge of the blade and stuff. So yeah, just for simplicity, I had to drop back to this. The modeling software was really not liking turning this corner or these weird wavy lines into an actual blade. So that was just a quick little change that had to happen to get this stuff working as it should be working. Now, the next thing we're going to do is actually going to cut this thing for printing. So as you can see, I've now added in the gem that sits in the hilt. This hilt might be a little thick, but I'm pretty happy with it so far. We're going to cut down the handle and make that a little shorter. I also need to cut some holes in things and put some registration marks into here. So my plan is to kind of put some extra little bumps on the inside of the sword blade and cut holes in the outside out here so that those two things register together and sit down nicely, so that when I go to glue them in place later on, probably not in this episode, probably after we paint it, these things do just connect together correctly and I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So for now I need to cut some holes in the handguard and in the pommel. I do have a hole in there already for the gem, and I need to put these registration marks in, and then we can get printing, and there's a few different pieces to print this time round. So it is results time. The stuff has come off the printer and I have dragged out the jungle sword for two reasons. A, because I really like it, and B, for a bit of comparison. Now, this actually may have been a bad idea because I didn't do the dagger at the right size. Check it out. So this is the dagger. It is really not at the right size. This could stand to be about 1.5 or 2 times the size it currently is. And actually, the other reason part of it's not together is that I messed up all of my tolerances in these gaps, and that means that this section of the blade doesn't actually jam into the handguard there very nicely. So it actually means that scaling this up to 1.5 times or up to 2 times is actually going to make this thing better, because all of the pieces are going to fit together just that little bit easier. But on the whole, I really like the shape of this thing. I mean, check it out. So there we go. Little gem sitting in the back there. The pommel is quite nice. This handguard, I do need to sort out some of the issues that I had with support material up here. But it is actually quite cool. And as long as I hold the blade together, the blade looks awesome. Really happy with that. So I'm thinking probably in a week or two I will print this again at 1.5 or 2 times size. I'm going to have a look at exactly how big those numbers are and how big this dagger will be, because I want it to scale out to about the same size as this jungle sword. Although, of course, it is always going to be a little bit smaller because it is supposed to be a dagger, so I want to kind of scale them at least similarly, I guess, is what I want to do. But yeah, so for now, I'm pretty happy with the model here, though. This model is pretty good, and I really like all of the detail and stuff that I've got out of this. The bigger one is definitely going to need a bit of a sand, especially on this hand guard, because it prints in a very weird angle, which means that there are some kind of weird things that go on with the layer lines and the support material and stuff. But if I stop dropping the pieces around the place, like I said, I'm pretty happy. This thing looks pretty damn cool. So there we go. Anyway, that is going to be it for this week. Hope you guys have enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next video.